Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Jasmina Aganovic is the president of Mother Dirt, a line of biome-friendly personal care products focused on restoring and maintaining the balance of the skin biome. The technology is based off research from Biome Therapeutics, a biotech company focused on transforming human health through products that restore Ammonia-Oxidizing Bacteria, otherwise known as AOB, which current hygiene practices have stripped from the modern microbiome. She's a cosmetic and consumer goods entrepreneur who received her degree in chemical and biological engineering through MIT. Her career path combined her technical background with roles at consumer brands like LVMH, Fresh, and Living Proof, and now the president of Mother Dirt. Welcome to the show, Jasmina.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Excellent. So I guess I wanted to ask you first and foremost, if you could perhaps share with us the human story of Mother Dirt. So why did you come up with a product that was biome friendly?
Oh, absolutely. The story actually starts about 15 years ago. Our founding scientist, his name is David Whitlock, who also went to MIT, and his background is also in chemical engineering. He was on a date with a woman who happened to be an equestrian, and sort of flippantly, she posed this question to him about why her horses roll in the dirt at very specific times of the year. Like most of us, probably, David initially thought that it had something to do with insects, but it turned out that was not the case. And he became very focused on figuring out why horses had evolved that need. And even more interestingly, why all mammals have an evolved need to roll in the dirt. If you have a pet, like a dog or a cat, you've certainly seen them do this. Obviously, hippos, and the list goes on and on. All mammals have this evolved ritual of rolling in the dirt. And David thought that the fact that that was so ubiquitous and common across all of these animals must make it very important to them from an evolutionary standpoint. And so he started to explore connections between dirt and mammalian skin. And it was this journey that ultimately led him to the class of bacteria that we work with called Ammonia-Oxidizing Bacteria, as you had mentioned in the introduction. Formally, we formed the company about 5, almost 6 years ago, and started researching the bacteria to understand its mechanism and to understand its role on mammalian skin. And really what that showed us was that this bacteria likely existed on human skin as recently as the last 100 years, but that it's been removed through our shift in lifestyle, so spending more and more time indoors, and also much of the personal care and hygiene practices that we've introduced into our lives at a very rapid rate over the last few generations. So that was the initial founding story of our technology and how that unfolded over the course of a few years. 2014 was a watershed moment in our company. We did an initial cosmetic clinical study to answer the question of whether or not we could even reintroduce this bacteria to our skin. The idea was that our skin biome has probably evolved so much because of modern hygiene and lifestyles that it might already be too hostile to reintroduce this fragile microorganism. So we did a study, and one of the participants in the study wrote about her experience. And that article was so widely circulated in the New York Times that it made us realize that the public was very interested in not only this body of research, but just the general topic about what does it actually mean to be clean. And the defining it as 99.9% free of bacteria was probably not accurate. That was where we started to think about how can we create additional vehicles to facilitate this conversation. And this is really where I came in to create Mother Dirt.
Great. So, Jasmina, what does it mean to be clean then?
Yeah, well, that definition is changing, right? And there's a lot of really interesting discussion around what it means. We used to believe, based on the germ theory of disease, that clean meant being sterile. And we believed that if we removed bacteria, that we would be clean. And of course, the end goal of all of this was to be healthy. There's this really interesting thing that is happening, and interesting in a bad way. It's that we are cleaner than ever, and we have more products to help us be clean, more than ever before. And yet health has not come along for the ride. In fact, many would argue that health is a more and more difficult thing to get and to find. And we live in the age of inflammatory skin disorders and the age of inflammation in general. And so the big question is, what have we missed? There's something as a missing piece in this definition of clean. Of course, not all bacteria are good, so you don't want some pathogenic bacteria to be there, but there's a lot more to the story. And so it's looking more and more like what clean actually means, the clean that comes with healthy, is more about balance versus stripping and less about sterility.
Right. Okay. So why is it then that, say, something like SARS comes along and now we have to use hand sanitizer everywhere we go?
I'll separate out those two issues. So first, to talk about the perhaps easier one, which is the hand sanitizer issue. And we're not producing a commentary on hand hygiene actually at all. Washing your hands has been one of the things that has been proven to improve health and to decrease the passage of disease. Here's the thing, though. The caveat to that is that washing your hands with plain soap and water has been shown to be just as effective as using an antibacterial soap or a hand sanitizer. So the question becomes to kill 100% or 99.9% of bacteria when to gain the actual benefit that you want, just using basic soap is good enough. And this logic and this reasoning was one of the reasons that the FDA banned consumer-facing antibacterial products last year. And the FDA's reasoning was that we have not shown that it is actually better for us to be able to do that. The big caveat or the big exception here is, of course, environments like hospitals. Those are very extreme environments. Obviously, going into surgery, those are things where we actually do need the very standard definition of clean, meaning sterile. So hand hygiene in general is one of those that we are not butting heads against. Wash your hands and keep washing your hands, because your hands go in parts of the world that the rest of your body doesn't. So hand washing is definitely important and a good thing. Do you need to use antibacterial hand products? Probably not. Now, to talk about the more serious diseases that come out, I'm not an infectious disease specialist, but I'm going to draw a more perhaps relevant example, or at least something that's closer to the field of work that we are in. If we look at a disease like acne, acne was very often believed to be tied to a type of bacteria. The discovery of P. acnes was made, and everyone said, okay, this is why we get acne, and all we need to do is kill this bacteria, and then we have cured acne. But that didn't happen. And we see there are all of these both prescription and over-the-counter products that are used to kill this class of bacteria. We have not cured acne. In fact, the rates of acne have only been increasing. That was an interesting observation, followed by the fact that as we started to look into the microbiome, collectively, the research community, they saw that virtually everyone has P. acne on their skin, but some people have the visual signs of acne and others do not. And so that begged the question, okay, why does everyone have this class of bacteria on their skin and only some of us have issues? And once again, it goes back to this idea of balance, which we talked about earlier. It's less about the presence or absence of certain types of bacteria. It's much more about what the other bacteria around it are doing.
That's fascinating. So you mentioned that acne is actually rising. Do you actually know what the statistics are now with, say, acne and MRSA and those sorts of skin diseases?
So I don't have statistics off the top of my head for MRSA, but I know for acne, 80 million people in the United States have acne, which is an astounding statistic considering that there's 250 to 300 million people in the United States. I also know that the United States is the number one consumer of global prescription acne medication. And if you look at that compared to 10 years ago and 20 years ago, that has grown tremendously. I think over the last 10 years, the rates of childhood eczema have increased by 30%. And all of this is pointing to inflammatory skin diseases, which makes no sense because we have been cleaner than ever. We have more topical products that we can use to supposedly help us with these issues. And yet these issues are not going in the direction that we expect.
Do you think, though, that goes beyond the skin and potentially to nutrition?
Absolutely. I think that there's a combination of lifestyle factors that all contribute to this. One of the things I was talking about earlier with this class of bacteria, We lost it, of course, because of our hygiene practices, but that wasn't the only reason we lost it. We lost it because of also our lack of connection to nature. We shifted our lifestyle so much indoors. And there's a similar parallel to other categories and industries. Look at how much our nutrition and our eating habits have changed as the agriculture industry has changed and the Industrial Revolution happened over the last 50 to 75 years. Human beings and how we live and how our lifestyles have changed have evolved much more rapidly than actually our natural evolution, which is why I think we're bumping up against these issues at increasing rates. But for sure, nothing can be siloed to just one thing. If the microbiome is teaching us anything, it's actually that the human body is remarkably connected.
But potentially, though, with those people that are suffering acne, and it sounds like everyone actually has acne on their skin potentially, but would a Mother Dirt, say, face wash be of benefit to those people?
Very interesting question that you ask. It's not something that we're able to answer currently. Our clinical partner, Biome, is actually doing research studies together with the FDA. We're currently in phase 2 trials to understand how our class of bacteria could potentially impact acne. So the answer to your question is right now, the answer is no. And we're trying to go through the proper scientific process to see if we can get to a better understanding of it. And maybe one day the answer will be yes.
So what products do you actually make? And I guess what effects have you found with those products and what's in them?
Yeah, great question. I'll start off with our hero product. That product is called the AO Plus Mist. That's really where everything started for us. That is the only product in our line that contains a live culture of this bacteria that comes from the soil. We refer to it as the peacekeeping bacteria. Anyone who orders the product, whether it be on our site or Amazon, the product is going to arrive in this sort of space bag looking thing. And the reason for that is to protect the live culture inside. We want to make sure that it's not exposed to temperature extremes. People can use it very easily. You just shake the bottle, spray it on head to toe as the finishing step in your routine. And while the bacteria is on your skin, it's promoting balance. And we can talk a little bit more about the mechanism of that and what that means specifically later on. But this is the product that our cosmetic studies were done around. And then we have a line of supporting products, 3 specifically. We have a cleanser and a shampoo and a moisturizer. These products don't contain the live culture, but they're formulated in a specific way to be compatible with the skin's ecosystem and specifically compatible with the mist. And this is because we view the solution or our approach as a twofold process. The first being putting back what our skin has lost, but secondly, taking another look at how we formulate products, because we know that much of modern chemistry is what's contributed to the removal of this bacteria. And we want to see if we can develop products that don't interfere with that like it has been.
And I'm not sure if I was supposed to, but I love that mist. And I ended up using it as a deodorant. I actually wanted to get a deodorant from you guys and realized that potentially there might be one coming, but there isn't one here at the moment. So I experimented a bit with the mist over the last probably month, using it as a deodorant. Now, I'm not a big sweater, but I actually found it worked as a deodorant.
Yeah, talk about a really interesting use case. So I would say over half of our users are able to move off of deodorant completely because of their use of the mist. So here I'll talk a little bit about the mechanism of the bacteria and what it's actually doing. And this I find fascinating. Full warning, it is a very weird way to think about skincare. But the bacteria is feeding off of the irritating components in your sweat. So your sweat is one of the ways that your body detoxes. And one of the components in your sweat that has a very high pH and is very irritating and why your body is trying to push it out is ammonia. Ammonia has a very high pH. It can be very irritating to your skin if you don't remove it. And what this bacteria is doing is it's basically removing that ammonia and making sure that the pH of your skin stays within the normal range, which in and of itself is very beneficial. But because this is a live bacteria, this means that it has an active metabolism. It is consuming things on the front end and it is producing things on the back end, so to speak. So it's producing these 2 byproducts as a result of consuming that ammonia, and it's turning them into basically something that helps keep the ecosystem in check. So it produces a component called nitrite. So nitrite is known to have an effect on other types of bacteria. And the other component that it produces is nitric oxide, and this is known as a calming and a soothing agent. So 24/7 as this bacteria is on your skin, it's keeping the pH in a healthy range, and it's producing these beneficial byproducts.
So is that why you mentioned the word balance?
Yes. So we see that by reintroducing this bacteria, that there is a shift in the overall ecosystem of the skin.
That's fascinating. So why is it then you don't use that same ingredient for the other three products?
Part of it has to do with formulation constraints. So with a live culture of bacteria, suspending it in anything other than a very basic saltwater solution or an aqueous solution is very challenging. It would not be able to survive. But also, and more importantly, we do believe that the approach does have to be complementary. It is important that we restore what our skin has lost, but it is equally as important to include microbiome compatibility as a criteria for personal care formulation. And so that's why our biome-friendly products are formulated in the way that they are.
Okay, so in the same respect then, assuming that our soil is the same as it was several years ago, which we know it's not, would it be better then if a child runs around and plays in the dirt, or hopefully an adult does the same, that we just decided not to even clean ourselves afterwards? Would that sort of, in a way, be the same result?
So I think to some parts of that, David Whitlock, our scientific founder, would definitely say yes. One of the things that is really important to note, though, is that with the advent of running water and access to running water, there were a lot of improvements in public health and, of course, sanitation. To one degree, yes, we want to go back to living what it was like when we were completely interconnected with the land. On the other side, there have been important advances from a human evolution standpoint and a technological standpoint, I should say, like running water and access to clean water and understanding basic public sanitary needs that have been able to extend lifespans. So it's a balance of both. I think absolutely, if you're able to spend time outside in nature, put your feet in the soil or the dirt or swim in a lake or a river, the ocean, go for it. That is going to be good for you, assuming that there's like no lead poisoning in the soil or something like that. So expose yourself to nature, absolutely. But I also want to make sure that we don't make the past seem very grandiose. Lifespans were shorter several hundred years ago. People were not as healthy in other regards that we have been able to solve for. So think of this as like a next evolution and a modern interpretation of an interaction with how things once used to be.
And so you mentioned a few scientific studies that you're in progress with now. Have you done any other studies on any of the products that you could share with us the results, or are they not yet out?
Yes, absolutely. So we have cosmetically validated the AO Plus mist, meaning that we have proven that it is able to improve the look and feel of the skin. So that's the cosmetic validation piece. And we've done a series of double-blinded, placebo-controlled studies that indicate that this is true. And these have all been done by third parties, so they are validated. Our clinical division is the one that's doing research with the FDA. And the nature of work with the FDA is that you don't really disclose results until certain stages of studies have been done. But what I can talk about is what we have done on the consumer side, and I can share a little bit more specifically the studies that we've done and what we've learned for them. So one of the studies, for example, we did on skin clarity, and what we were able to show is that within 4 weeks, skin clarity was improved by about 35%. We're able to demonstrate an improvement in the appearance of oily skin. So within about 4 weeks, the amount of shine that appears on your face at the end of the day is going to decrease by about 22% on average, is what we found. We also were able to demonstrate that the bacteria and its presence on the skin is able to keep the pH of the skin within a healthy range. We also did some studies on problem skin as well as on dry skin. So with dry and rough and bumpy skin, we were able to demonstrate an improvement in skin smoothness by about 25% in a span of 4 weeks. And I'll say that there was a placebo arm to all of these studies, and we either partnered with a clinical research lab or a group of dermatologists and their patients to be able to run these studies.
Jasmina, this is a bit of a personal question, but how long have you been using the products for?
I've been using the product for 4 years now.
The reason I ask is because if anyone sees a photo of you or meets you in person, I'm sure that they will use the products.
Oh, that's so kind. I will, elaborate a little bit on just my own personal skin journey. Blessing and a curse. I think that part of, my experience having struggled with my skin as a teenager really is what triggered my interest in this as an industry. So despite the experience that I went through, I sort of am grateful for it because it is sort of what got my career going in the creative direction that it did. It has been a very special experience for me working on this because I do fundamentally believe that it would have changed my life had I known about it much earlier on. And I know that there are a lot of people that are just like I was, and it is a fundamental radical shift. And I really do believe in it. And I do think that the world needs it. So our whole team is highly motivated because, I know that I'm not unique. And I certainly know that there are others, many, many others that feel similarly.
What were your skin issues and how did you go about dealing with them?
So as a teenager, like many teenagers, I had very bad acne, and this continued into college. And as I became an adult, it became better. But as a teenager, I did everything from taking antibiotics for months on end to applying topical antibiotics to, oh my gosh, getting even cortisone shots, to having terrible experiences with dermatologists, to trying whatever products were being sold online and in store. I mean, I literally tried to do everything. It did not get better. If anything, you are just frustrated and self-conscious. I tried peels, I tried facials, you name it, I tried it. I mean, it was basically almost a 10-year long experience. So lots of time to try very different things. As things started to get better, and perhaps this was me moving out of puberty and becoming an adult, and, my body was probably changing as well, I had a very elaborate routine. I had maybe 8 steps in my morning routine and my evening routine. And these steps came from a place of, I have to do this, otherwise my skin is just going to freak out. And I sort of lived in fear of finicky skin. And you feel like it's all a very delicate balancing act. And then when I learned about the work that the original team here was doing, and I started speaking to them about the research, there was something about it that was so antithetical to everything that I had been told. And yet it made perfect sense at the same time. I mean, I fundamentally do not believe that we as human beings have to go through a rite of passage where we get acne and go through this terrible, difficult experience. I don't believe that it is normal or necessary for a 2-year-old to have eczema and to just grow out of it. I do think that our bodies know how to take care of themselves, and that somehow we got disconnected from that. And being able to pave a way back to a more native, quote unquote, state of our skin before we started doing chemistry experiments on it, I think is very plausible, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Do I think that we need 8 steps to have good skin? I don't think so, for sure. And I never believed that. It has been very interesting, I think, for me personally, because now my routine is so simple and my skin has never been better. And what's even better than that is I don't even have to worry about it. I'm not nearly as meticulous about it as I was before because I don't need to be. So it's very liberating to not have to think about it for a fraction of the time as I once did.
That's great. I mean, that's quite inspiring for people out there who I know have had major struggles with their skin, just to know that it actually might not be that hard. You might not have to struggle that much. Just on that note, now that you know what you know and say turn back time, what would you do differently apart from buy Mother
I would
Dirt?
I would definitely apply a less is more philosophy. I think really going back to basics and thinking about how I, shouldn't wash my skin nearly as much as I did, how I shouldn't expose my skin to nearly as much chemistry as I did. I would just need to let it be, take it easy, balance itself out, be much more holistic in my approach. I think taking care of my mental health and taking care of my digestive health, I think my approach would have been much more holistic versus aggressive. And granted, the time period that I was in when I was a teenager, it was very quick fix, intense, aggressive. Like if things burned, it felt good. You felt like it was working. And that has changed. I would have had a very different mindset with which to approach things.
Would it be true to say, though, Jasmina, that little still seems to be known about the skin?
Absolutely. I think that there's a lot to learn about the skin microbiome. I don't think that our class of bacteria is the end all be all. I think that there's a lot more that we can learn and that we have to learn. I think that there is a lot of complexity around some of the diseases that we are looking at. And I know that it's not Mother Dirt that's looking at it, but for people trying to solve acne or eczema, these are multifaceted diseases. And because it likely involves the microbiome, we have seen that the microbiome is interconnected throughout our whole bodies, which makes the problem exponentially more complex. So while we don't have all of the answers and we have a lot more questions potentially than we do answers, what's very exciting is that this is a whole new world of opportunity for us to find solutions, which is just exciting.
That's awesome. So on that note, where to from here in terms of, I guess, Mother Dirt products and research?
Yeah, well, with Mother Dirt, we want to continue doing what we set out to do originally. We want to continue using our products as a vehicle for a conversation with the general public about what we believe is a necessary shift in our relationship with the microbial world. For us, our products have been not about revenue. They have been about this dialogue and this conversation. So it's a sort of a clever way into people's lives to have them see and experience that there is a shift to be had here. So our mission is really going to focus on that. We're starting to increase the number of channels that we will be available in. We started off just on our website and we expanded to Amazon, which was a big move for us. We've been doing a few test and learns with a few wonderful key retail partners, and we hope to really build on that over the next year so that people can walk into their favorite store and have a conversation with someone there about our product and hopefully give it a try. So that's really how we are looking at things. What I think the future of the field will look like, I'm very excited here. I think the industry as a whole is so interested in this, which is really wonderful to see. I think the most feasible next step and next milestone will be integrating microbiome compatibility into all cosmetic formulation and skincare formulation. I think that that's a very feasible step to accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years. I think past that, we might even be looking at a lot of living products and maybe even one day more personalized microbiome treatments. It is very exciting and a lot of work that needs to be done, but that's sort of how I see the future looking.
And what would a personalized product look like, do you think?
Well, I think as we gain a better understanding of what a native skin microbiome or even a native microbiome looked like, along with that, we can start to understand how we can manipulate the microbiome. So how can we push certain populations to be more present or less present without needing to kill everything? I think that we can start to be very targeted with how we introduce certain types of bacteria or cocktails of bacteria to an ecosystem. So here's what I mean by this. So I think if someone, I'm going to give an extreme example that's very far removed from Mother Dirt, but if someone has a very serious disease, let's say they have C. diff. C. diff, interestingly enough, is caused by being put on antibiotics, leaves someone very susceptible to contracting C. diff. It's a very serious digestive disease, bacterial infection, and a lot of people die from it every single year. Instead of basically putting them on an even harsher round of antibiotics to try and kill that bacteria and further removing any other good and potentially beneficial bacteria in their digestive system, someone could look at their microbiome and say, this is the cocktail of bugs that they need to help replenish some of the stuff that they have lost and to help keep the C. diff in check and potentially remove it from their ecosystem if possible. So that's what I mean by some of the targeted, personalized treatments from there.
I don't suppose that's too far away with like fetal transplants and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about fecal transplants is that they work, but people don't really know how they work. So I think that this is why it's not like a standard recommendation by the FDA, and I don't even think that it's approved by the FDA. People understand that transplanting someone with a healthier fecal microbiome has a benefit, but they are not able to pinpoint what the mechanism is and how exactly it works and why certain bacteria from person A leads to an outcome in person B. So a lot of, points and blanks need to be filled in. There is even someone at UC San Diego who is actually doing something similar, but specifically for the armpit. So they are doing armpit microbiome transplants from people who are struggling with body odor. They're taking the armpit microbiome from someone that does not have body odor to someone that does have body odor to see if they could make them stop smelling.
Wow, that's amazing. You mentioned that Mother Dirt sort of is your way in, or the company's way in, to get the word out there and to make people realize the importance of the skin microbiome.
Yeah.
What message or tip or even question would you have for our listeners that you'd like to share as a sort of a final comment?
The most powerful exercise that I've done, and full credit to Larry Weiss, who is an advisor to the company, and he worked with us as a chief medical officer for many of our early years. And he is a very, for sure, profound thinker about the space and the work that we've done. And he takes people through this thought exercise that I think is so remarkably powerful in driving home our core message. And the thought exercise goes like this. So for you, actually, I'll take you through it. And for anyone that's listening right now, close your eyes and imagine your favorite scene in nature and capture that image, hold on to it. And now I'm going to ask you a question. Was there a person in that image?
No.
Yes. And so Larry has done this in front of audiences of hundreds of people. And sometimes there is someone that raises their hand. And the reason this is so powerful is because it shows how much we have actually separated ourselves and removed ourselves from nature. And there's a lot of layers to this. You know, first it's, hey, we sort of came from the earth, we evolved from the land, and yet we no longer see ourselves as part of it. That's the most superficial observation. The other observation is we don't see ourselves as connected to it at all. And yet we derive so much benefit from it every single day. The deeper layer, going to the microorganism level, this is how we inoculated ourselves with bacteria. The way that we got exposed to even our class of bacteria, these AOBs, is by walking barefoot, by swimming in lakes and rivers and streams. These were all natural inoculation mechanisms. So all the way from the emotional spectrum of, you know, we don't interact with nature anymore, and that's such a sad thing, all the way down to the scientific level, the fact that we're no longer immersing ourselves in our natural environment anymore, and that scientifically might be bad for us. So I love that exercise as sort of a message to take away. And that's one of the things that we are trying to change. We're trying to get people to interact with nature in an unexpected way because we believe that it's good and necessary for all of our health.
That's awesome. And actually, funnily enough, when you said, was there a person in the nature, I was sort of sitting in the nature looking out at the water. And so I said no, but I mean, I felt I was there, but I didn't see anyone else. So perhaps I misinterpreted that as well. But I can totally get the point there that we're just so far separated from nature. Funnily enough, I moved to Manhattan about 4 months ago, and I can really relate to that.
Yeah. That's one of my favorites.
That's a great message. And look, Jasmina, I think I know the answer to this. I think I could guess, but it's actually sort of skin related. It's a question that we ask all our guests on the show. Do you have a tattoo?
I don't have a tattoo, no.
Funnily enough, that was my guess. Have you ever thought about it?
Totally. In fact, I'll tell a funny story if we do have time.
Sure.
So I went to a fun event with some of my girlfriends. And as part of the event, they had these really cool looking temporary tattoos. And I thought, cool, I'm going to do this. So what? I mean, it's temporary tattoo. It's going to go away. So I put it on the inside of my arm. And I got home and I thought I could easily rinse it. And it was a very good temporary tattoo. Like this thing was not washing away no matter how much I scrubbed it. And I thought, so what? Like, this is cool. I've always thought about getting one and I've always been too chicken. 2 or 3 days later, I still have this tattoo on my arm and I go to a yoga class. So I do Bikram every now and then. And so in Bikram, you're obviously not wearing many clothing. So my tattoo is on full display and I feel so cool in that room because, you know, everyone can see my tattoo in the mirror, even though it was a very silly tattoo. But what was so embarrassing is as I started sweating through this class, the tattoo started dripping off. And so everyone could see it in the mirror. And I just felt like such a fake and a phony. And it was embarrassing, but it was really, really funny. So I have thought about it, but I don't know that I would ever go through with it.
That's a great story. And I guess if you do think about it again, you'll make sure that it is permanent and not going to wash off in your class.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. Look, thank you very much for coming on today and sharing that with us. I'm going to link to your website in the show notes. Is there anything else that I should link to?
Our website is great. And if folks are interested in the clinical research that our clinical partner Biome is doing, you're welcome to link to their site as well.
Awesome. And we do have a lot of international listeners. At the moment, can people outside of the US buy your products?
They can, actually. They can. And I'll give a few specific pointers. So if you're located in the UK or the EU, you can buy our products on Amazon. We also have a few retailers in the UK. In London specifically, we're carried at Whole Foods UK, Planet Organic, and Content Beauty and Wellbeing. But Amazon is also a great resource for anyone in the UK or the EU.
And what about Australia and Hong Kong?
For Australia and other parts of the world, you can order directly from our website. We are looking at Australia very closely, so we're hoping to expand distribution and support it more robustly over the course of the next 6 to 9 months.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And I totally recommend your products. And I don't say that often because I don't tend to sort of promote particular things on the show. But I must say I used your products and I was very impressed. And like my skin actually did feel really great and looked really good as well.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that. And I really appreciate it. I really do.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.